I want to talk today about facing our fears. Now, fears are so powerful for many of us, and we often think we want to do anything but face our fears, and yet we make them so much bigger than they often are. The first thing we have to do is actually stop turning away from them. Now, I'm not talking about turning away from what we're afraid of. I'm talking about turning away from the fear. There's a difference. Turning away from the fear means that we don't let the fear inform us. We don't let the fear communicate with us. We don't find out what it's about, what it's trying to tell us, okay? So if we have a wild animal chasing us in the forest and we turn away from the fear, we might turn right toward that animal, right? We're not noticing, paying attention to maybe what's causing something to feel off, to make us want to run, to cause us to move away from something, okay? We need to be willing to stop running away and turning away from our fear itself. We need to say, okay, what is this fear? Now, obviously, if it's the kind of fear that's going to make you run away from a wild animal in the forest, you're not going to take the time to analyze your fear at that moment. I'm talking about the fears of every day, the kinds of things that keep us stuck, the kinds of things that keep us from moving forward in our lives. And we notice that, like, oh, I would never do that. I'm afraid of, public speaking, or I'm afraid of putting myself out there in a different way. I'm afraid of what my parents will think, or what my kids will think, or what my peers will think, right? What are those fears? Instead of ignoring them and just kind of saying, okay, I'm afraid of this, and then moving on, what if we actually turn toward them? Stop turning away from them. Find out what they have to say to us. Find out what they are trying to communicate with us, right? Now, we want to also consider that we want to name our fears. When we name them, and I mean name them with clarity, name them with that willingness to turn toward them, okay? So, okay, I'm afraid of public speaking, but there's usually something different beneath that. Like, I'm afraid of being judged by the people that I'm speaking to, right? We need to name the deeper fears. We need to be willing to look at what's underneath, because often once we start turning toward the fears and stop turning away from them, we start to notice that the thing we think we're afraid of really has other underlying fears, okay? Then we can start to dialogue with the fears. We can start to say, okay, show me what you got. Talk to me about what it is you really need to say. Why are you afraid? What's really going on? This is where we can get to that deeper place of naming them, but going even further once they're named and saying, okay, I'm afraid of judgment. So now what? Like, what kinds of judgments could happen? What's the worst that could happen? You're literally dialoguing with the fear to ask, what is going on? What is creating all of this resistance? And you get to find out, like, oh, maybe that really is a significant thing to look at, and maybe cause you to discern more carefully how you present yourself. Like, let's say you're going to go out and public speak about a topic that, I don't know, maybe you end up talking about certain people, and it can end up causing harm to them in some way that you hadn't thought about. Or, this concept of the judgment, maybe something comes up where, you have a certain reputation. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not talking about protecting our reputations at the expense of being real and honest and truthful. That is not at all what I'm talking about. But I do think that sometimes we have to determine the proper timing, the proper audience, the proper situation for us to go ahead and say what we need to say, or express what we need to express. For example, I know authors who didn't want to write a book about their life, their memoir, until perhaps their parents had passed, because they didn't want to cause harm, or have their parents' lives end up in the public spotlight. For example, that may be something very real that is a gesture of kindness, a gesture of thoughtfulness, depending on the circumstance, right? that can also be a gesture of enabling instead of calling something out. So we have to be discerning, but through the dialogue, through having the conversation with the fear to really understand what's real, what's the truth about this situation, what's really going on behind the scenes, okay? Then we can begin to look at the strength and the assets of the fear. Is the fear that we have expansive? In other words, is it something where it's actually taking us to our edges if we were to move toward the fear, if we were to dance with the fear a bit? You know, would it help us to become stronger, more skilled? Is the fear really more about, you know, what we're uncomfortable with and don't know about, but yet if we go toward it and learn to do that thing we've been afraid of, like having our first public talk, for example, is that what would help us to actually move into a place where the fear begins to dissolve because we start to realize, oh, that wasn't so bad, right? I know a lot of I've seen interviews with actors that will say, and even you know, my own kids acting in their musicals and school plays will say, oh my gosh, you know, I'm so nervous to go on stage. And yet they're facing the fear. They're moving into that fear because they know it's expanding them. It's making them better at their craft. It's allowing them to push those edges, to try something new, to open themselves up. But we also need to ask, is the fear contractive? So are we contracting with that fear? That would be more the running away from the tiger in the woods kind of fear, you know, where we're like, okay, I can't be here. This is dangerous for me to be in this space or with this person or in this situation. There's a real threat here that I have to consider. And that is a more contractive fear. By dialoguing with our fears, we start to get to know them. We start to get to know if the fear is one of more expansion that we need to actually move toward, or true contraction that we need to move away from. And the final thing I want to leave you with around facing our fears is, can we allow them? It is so natural and so human to have fear. Can we befriend them even and say, yeah, this is the thing. This is part of me. Maybe I have old stories that I'm still working through. And rather than beating ourselves up and saying, God, I should be over this. I shouldn't be afraid. This shouldn't be a problem. All the shoulds that we put on ourselves. Could we instead say, yep, there's my old friend, fear. There's my old friend talking to me, letting me know I'm getting to know them better. I'm learning to take baby steps toward that fear, or to understand that fear, or to dialogue with that fear. Can we just simply allow it and befriend it? Because then we can start to take the energy that's connected with it and move it toward our true passions in life and the ways in which we're supposed to express. If this has been helpful, please subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, take care.